going to be the best quality, but YouTube was frozen and now it's back, but it's now back on my what's its face? It's now back on my it's back on my webcam because my camera died. Sorry. Okay, so back to the news. Sri Lanka protesters seize presidential residence. The protests on the island began after the worst economic crisis in the history of the country. The authorities of the island recently declared default. The president himself had to flee. Zelensky published another collection of photographs of military in Ukraine. The eyes of all aggressive political movements and regiments and regimes in the world are now focused on what Russia is doing against us, against Ukraine. Will the world be able to bring real war criminals to justice? If so, it will be strong support for peace on earth in the future. If not, if hundreds of treaties and conventions violated by Russia remain mere pieces of paper, then humanity will have to deal with hundreds of other aggressors. So let me show you these photographs. Also, guys on YouTube, interacting with the live helps a lot. I see Vasili's back. Does it mean Cini took over Vasili's bed? No. Cini took over my bed. Vasili's just back. Hi, Jen. Oh. The British Coldplay covered Okean Elz's song Hug at a concert in Warsaw. Very touching. Oh, Obima. So it's not Hug, it's Hugs. Hi, yeah, you can write to me on Instagram. My Instagram DMs are open. That's so awesome, and they actually did a pretty good job. And Christy, my Instagram DMs are open, so and it's the same thing as here, so I will be definitely responding. More than 994 children suffered as a result of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation in Ukraine. As of the morning of July 9th, 2022, the official number of child victims is 347, with over 647 injured. Visiting the Ukrainian military, on the video, The Life of Our Defenders, this is how heroes live.
Одна. Я теж думав одна.
Одна, да. А то воно по-різному. Весна. 6 S-300 missiles in the city. St. Nicholas takes care of us. No victims. The head of the Mykolaiv region, Vitaly Kim, about the morning shelling of Mykolaiv. In the morning, the Russians shelled the Sumy region. After 7 a.m., a Russian helicopter fired 2 rockets at the Bilopolska community. At 7:30 a.m., 5 rockets from the MLRS were fired at the Khotyn community. At about 7:45, a Russian helicopter fired on the Miropol community. Information about the victims and destruction is being specified, said the head of the Sumy region, Dmytro Zhivitsky. The radius of destruction of new missiles of the HIMARS missile defense system on the infographic. So this is what the HIMARS that we were given by the Americans can reach in the radius. So as I said yesterday, we are being given HIMARS with a 300-kilometer range by the United States, which means that those HIMARS can reach the Crimean Bridge that's over here. And that's the Crimean Bridge that we need to destroy in order to significantly slow down Russians. Now, we didn't have a chance of doing that without the 300-kilometer range HIMARS, but now we do. So now we're going to be able to take care of that, and I hope that that's going to be one of the first things that we do once we have those HIMARS. Consequences of the shelling of Ghulaypole. Invaders shoot at the city in the Zaporizhia region every day. A photo of the consequences of shelling is shown by the Zaporizhia Regional Military Administration. Here is what they look like. YouTube crashed, but it's back up, John. YouTube crashed because my camera died. I only have one battery, and normally it's charged, but we've been taking the camera out with us to do vlogs, so it's not been charged always. Power engineers returned electricity to 23 settlements of Donetsk region yesterday. Thanks to the fact that the armed forces of Ukraine were able to suppress enemy artillery fire, DTEK, Akhmetov's emergency team, restored the destroyed power lines and connected more than 13,000 houses. 20 DTEK emergency teams are working in the region at the same time. The most difficult situation is in the Slavyansk, Bakhmut, and Avdiivsk directions. 10 European countries fulfilled 100% of their promises for the supply of weapons to Ukraine. The leaders in deliveries are Poland, 100% of the promised weapons, Lithuania, France, Italy, Belgium, Luxembourg, Finland, Slovenia, Austria, Bulgaria. In absolute terms, after the United States and Poland, the leaders in military assistance to Ukraine are the UK and Canada. In terms of percentage, Estonia, Norway, Czech Republic, the Netherlands, Lithuania. This is followed by Slovakia, Spain, Sweden, Denmark, Australia. As for Germany, out of the promised military assistance, it provided Ukraine with 39.9%. It is followed by New Zealand, 31%, and Greece, 5.8%. South Korea, Portugal, Romania, and Croatia have not yet provided Ukraine with the promised assistance. In total, Western countries have promised Ukraine to provide military assistance in amount of 80.7 billion euros. We are working on the reconstruction of our country. With representatives of road construction contractors, we discussed the specifics of restoring infrastructure facilities in wartime conditions. It is important that the construction companies continue to work in Ukraine even after the Russian invasion. Thank you for your help and support to Ukrainian cities. The new president of Sri Lanka will be the speaker of the country's parliament, the head of the Sri Lanka Muslim Congress Party. Ukraine is preparing for a possible invasion from Belarus, where the movement of Russian military equipment has been observed. Along the borders of Ukraine and Belarus, the armed forces of Ukraine mine the territory, as well as the engineering equipment off the borders. At the same time, in Kyiv, they started conducting military exercises for all those who wish. They're taught to shoot, provide medical aid, and work with explosive objects. Meanwhile, convoys of Russian equipment with V signs and USSR flags were seen in Belarus. A convoy of 10 KAMAZ of the armed forces of the Russian Federation and communication vehicles and tents was moving from the direction of Minsk in the direction of Bobruisk. In recent days, the number of Russian troops deployed on the territory of Belarus has increased significantly. Volodymyr Zelensky met with the head of the French Senate, Gerard Larcher, and a delegation from the upper house of the French parliament. Ukraine appreciates the attention and support. Hi, Sani, why are you making noises? Ukraine appreciates the attention and support of French senators. Pleased to meet with the president of the French Senate, Gerard Larcher, and the delegation of the upper house of the French parliament. I'm grateful for France's support of Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as for important assistance to our army and people in this difficult time. British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace will not run for Prime Minister. He will also not participate in the struggle for the leadership of the Conservative Party. Note that Wallace is a supporter of the toughest measures on the Putin regime. U.S. to provide $360 million in humanitarian aid to Ukraine, according to Blinken. The Russian army fired 6 S-300 missiles at Mykolaiv this morning, the mayor of the city of Sienkiewicz. They hit residential houses and private enterprises. Fortunately, there were no casualties. At the same time, Russian propagandists have already managed to declare that as a result of the morning shelling, the bus depot of one of the enterprises, which was used in the interest of the armed forces of Ukraine, was allegedly covered. But in the photo, in addition to cars, there are residential buildings. Bayraktar TB2 drones show incredible survivability in the Ukrainian sky against the S-300 and Russian aviation. In an interview to the Times, Bayraktar TB2 operator, a senior military intelligence officer of Ukraine with the call sign Odessa, told how the Bayraktar TB2 reconnaissance and strike drone can hold a blow and how impressive their quality is. The main thing is that almost all flight systems are duplicated, so he can return, even despite significant damage. According to him, once the Russian S-300 complex detected his Bayraktar TB2 near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, I saw the launch and explosion of a rocket nearby and lost contact. We were very upset because we thought we had lost the drone. But a few hours later, the drone miraculously returned and made an emergency landing at the airfield. It was damaged but survived. Moreover, this drone was later repaired and did a lot more good work. There is also a known case when a Russian aircraft hit Bayraktar TB2 with an air-to-air missile. The drone continued flying, but the operator was forced to abort the mission. Despite this, the UAV was able to return to base, albeit with significant damage. A video of the wounding of the leader of the Gonor organization, Sergei Filimonov, appeared, which was filmed by a journalist, Yuri Butusov. According to the journalist, about 40 Grad missiles hit them after stopping on the road. Butusov, hiding under the car, managed to turn on the camera and record the last 5 arrivals. Filimonov, immediately after being wounded, thought that his leg and arm had been torn off. In the hospital, he was found to have 12 wounds. His colleague with the call sign Predator received 3 wounds, but they were more severe than Filimonov's. Here is what that.
Давай, тихо. Тихо. Конечно, у меня большие. Стоп, старичок. Поехали быстро туда. Не, стой. Надо глянуть. Чекай, Саша.
No, those are Ukrainians.
Тихо. Сильно меня ранило. Надо вести. Да, сейчас. Давай быстрее. Давай, машину, поехали. Сейчас, Саня. Тихо, я сейчас загляну, что... Быстро накладывай. Держи, у тебя рука. Блядь, нога. Быстро, блядь. Юра, пустись мне скорую вызывать. Блядь, давай,
Hi, Carrie.
останови кровотечение. Тихо, тихо. Оно не сильное, нормально. Сейчас он остановит. Нормально, нормально.
Okay, so basically they got in a car and they were bringing the guy back to the hospital, or the guy to the hospital, because he's had some serious wounds. A number of explosions were heard in Mariupol, Speaker of Odessa Army, Serhiy Brachuk. As a result of one of them, 3 sappers died, and as a result of the other, a fire broke out on the territory of Azovstal. There is no preliminary information about the victims. 102,318 couples got married in Ukraine in the first 6 months of 2022, Ministry of Justice. Most marriages were registered in the Dnipropetrovsk region. More than 13,000 couples. Also among the leaders are Kyiv, 9,749, Odessa, 7,699, Lviv and Kyiv, 6,025 in regions. Russian military seized the Askania Nova Institute of Animal Husbandry. This was announced by the Speaker of Odessa Army, Serhiy Brachuk, with reference to New Day UA. On the main building of the institute, they hung out the Russian flag and assigned their director. It is Valery Tepikha, who previously worked at the Kherson Customs. At one time, his father worked as a deputy director of the same institute. The invaders called former employees to work. Security guards, drivers, and some scientists agreed to cooperate. Askania Nova is it's like a preservation facility for animals, basically. Zelensky fired Andriy Melnik, Ukrainian ambassador to Germany. The corresponding decree is published on the website of the OP. Zelensky also dismissed by his decrees the ambassador of Ukraine to Hungary, Lyubov Nepop, the ambassador of Ukraine to Norway, Vyacheslav Yatsuk, the ambassador of Ukraine to Czech Republic, Evgeny Parabinos, and the ambassador of Ukraine to India, Ihor Policha. From the creators of the fable, The Capture of Kyiv in 3 Days, a new information stuffing of Russian propaganda. Through TG channels affiliated with the Russian Special Services, information is now being actively disseminated that, allegedly, in the Russian Federation is recognized as a sponsor of terrorism. Moscow will declare a full-scale war on Kyiv within 24 hours. The entire text is riddled with threats and fantasies of propaganda. They're even talking about the almost complete destruction of Ukraine by massive missile and bomb strikes in 72 hours. Isn't that what's been happening for the last 5 months? Huh? What? In Chornobyevka, large-scale fire continues with detonation in the warehouses of Russians. Nadia Dorofeeva, Boombox, Okean Elzy launched a crowdfunding campaign for ammunition for Ukrainian women. Ukrainian stars have launched the Arm Women Now project, which is intended to sew women's uniforms for ZSU, or Armed Forces of Ukraine. The fact is that according to the statute of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, only male form has been approved, including underwear. The Arm Women Now project was created to fix this problem, to create comfortable and functional ammunition. Strike in Kryvyi Rih in the Radushna area. Alexander Vikul, head of the military administration of Kryvyi Rih. Vehicles and the public are advised to completely restrict movement. This is what the Ukrainian harvest looks like. This is the price of satiety of the whole world. Or satiety. Let me just show it closer on YouTube because it's hard to see. And this is what it looks like. Azov fighters were sentenced to death in the so-called DPR, local media and notorious Solovyov report. We're talking about Konstantin Fox Nikitenko, and his colleague Mykolaiv Frost. According to local publics, they were sentenced to death. But this photo, I thought, was a photo of Prokopenko, who is the commander of Azov forces. So I'm incredibly confused as to why this is it, but maybe I'm just confused. Invaders hit area near the village of Radushna in the Kryvyi Rih district using MLRS, head of the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Council, Mykola Lukashuk. There were 3 strikes. Now all the information is being clarified, preliminarily without casualties. As a result of today's shelling in Mariinka, Konstantinovka, and Pereyeznaya Donetsk region, 3 people were killed. Head of the Donetsk Army, Pavlo Kirilenko. In Konstantinivka, 3 people were wounded. In Zaitsevo, 4 people. In Pereyezdna, 1 person. Information about possible victims in Avdiivka is being specified. I'm actually going to I'm going to save this and I'm going to check it out later because that photo is kind of similar to the photo of Prokopenko before he became the commander of Azov. Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to step down next week. The decision was made against the backdrop of mass protests, according to the local news First portal. How Russia captured the village of Kremenная in the Luhansk region 7 times.
Стали представители Минобороны, военные стали по много раз брать под контроль одни и те же пункты. Смотрите сами. Вот 2 марта Коношенков сообщил об успешном наступлении в Луганской области. Захвачен город Кременная.
Установлен контроль над населенными пунктами. Красный Иман, Товская, Кременная.
7 марта войска продолжают наступать. Захвачены, погодите-ка, опять Кременная.
Группировка войск Луганской народной республики.
So this is basically calling them out on their propaganda because on one day they said that they took over that settlement, and then they said that they took over that settlement on another day, and then they said that they took over that settlement on another day, and then they said that they took over that settlement on another day, and it's been happening for like months in Russia, so they're basically lying about it. Ukraine will receive 1.7 billion in grant assistance, Prime Minister of Ukraine Denis Shmyhal. The money will be provided by the Single Donor Trust Fund established by IBRD, the International Development Association, and USAID. The money will be used to cover the costs of the state budget to pay for medical services. After the withdrawal of Russian troops from Zmyny Island, it became possible for ships to pass through the Danuba Black Sea Canal through the Bystry Estuary. The Ministry of Infrastructure of Ukraine reported the first ships have already used the open route. Today, the armed forces of Ukraine have eliminated 3 enemy bases with ammunition. In particular, demilitarization took place in the following settlements. Chernobyevka, Kherson region, an ammunition depot was destroyed. Khartsizk, Donetsk region, an ammunition depot was destroyed. Kadiivka, Stakhanov, Luhansk region, an ammunition depot was destroyed. Where did you see Sini? Vasily, is Sini in the living room? Is Sini in the living room?
Yes.
Oh. Oh no, she's right here. Somebody just saw her. Huh? Good night. Who's in the background? Listen. Evening address of Volodymyr Zelensky. Only during this day, the Russian army hit Mykolaiv, Kharkiv, Kryvyi Rih, and in communities of the Zaporizhia region, they have hit ordinary houses and civilian objects, absolutely deliberately. Purposefully, the brutal strikes and the Russian artillery in Donbass do not stop. Such terrorist acts can be stopped only with modern, accurate, powerful weapons. And I'm grateful to the United States of America for the decision to provide additional HIMARS systems and other weapons that allow us to take precisely anti-terrorist steps and reduce Russian strike capabilities. We will do everything to break the terrorist potential of the invaders. The Iron Dome is not suitable for Ukraine, said the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Oleksiy Reznikov, during a business conference on the Forbes platform. Reznikov claims that he spoke with the manufacturers of this system, and even in Israel, it does not guarantee 100% protection. The Iron Dome is made against slow, low altitude, easy-to-hit missiles made, in fact, in garages. The Iron Dome does not protect against cruise and ballistic missiles. We need to develop our own air defense missile defense system or receive it from our partners, Reznikov said. Invaders fired at Sumy region today using MLRS. 5 people were injured, head of Sumy Army, Dmytro Zhivitsky. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation reported on the destruction of the point of the Tornado Battalion. However, this battalion was dismissed in 2015. Yeah, Russians keep, capturing the same city over and over and over. They keep destroying battalions that don't exist. They're just doing such a great job. The Supreme Mufti of the Russian Federation, Talgat Tajudin, in his old age, decided that it was necessary to fight with the armed forces of Ukraine with Diklovus. At a sermon in honor of Eid al-Adha, he told gullible listeners about hordes of neo-Nazis who have been waging fratricidal genocide for 8 years. It is necessary to bring this matter. It is necessary to bring this matter to the end, so that there are no fascist parasites next to us. Because then there will not be enough Diklovus, said the bloodthirsty theologian. Recall that fascism is far-right, authoritarian political ideology and movement characterized by dictatorial power, militarism, violent suppression of opposition, belief in a natural societal hierarchy, subordination of individual interests for the good of the nation, and strict regulations of society and the economy. And that definition is perfect for today's Russia under the militaristic dictator Putin. There are at least 5 strikes in residential areas in Konstantinivka. It is already known about 1 dead and 18 injured. Russians destroy everything they touch. In the video, a wheat field burns out a few minutes later as a result of Russian artillery shelling of the Kharkiv region. So this is what that looks like. It's a wheat field. Hadra Hassan, I do not claim that he represents all Muslims. I never claimed that he does. I don't think that he does. I think that he himself is just a Russian Muslim, and he, in fact, is quite insane. But that's just about him and people who listen to him. I don't think he does represent all Muslims. I think that he does not represent most. Photo for the training process of the armed forces of Ukraine on the 105mm M119 light howitzers and M270B1 MLRS at the UK training grounds before being sent to the front are distributed on the network. So there is the photo. Just like Patriarch Kirill does not represent all Christians, this guy sure as hell does not represent all Muslims. War can be seen even from space. Thanks to the NASA firm systems, which fixes large fires, you can see the front line and the hottest spots. And this is what it looks like. Thank you, Dave. Oh. Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate it. And that concludes my news for today. I will put this behind. So, oh my gosh, sorry. It's a bit more difficult than I imagined organizing things behind each other on the desk. So bear with me for a second. Let me see. I've seen a couple of questions in the Q&A, so let me address those. All right. How do the sanctions work? Okay, so let's go with that one. The sanctions were supposed to work in a way where they would mostly target the Russian people and Russian corporations and make them uncomfortable to the point that where they would have to take action against the government who's causing these sanctions. They didn't necessarily work that way yet because most Russian people live under the poverty line to the point where none of the sanctions are affecting them, and they're not very effective yet because the sanctions should be targeting gold and Russian oil and gas systems, which is exactly what brings Russia the most money. Now, in the meanwhile, the Russian banks and people have been sanctioned, and it's been inconvenient for those few who are traveling, who can't use their cards anymore, and stuff like that. Russia has been getting billions and billions of dollars from Europe in gas and oil purchases because Europe would refuse to stop buying Russian gas and oil right away. And they have paid Russia more money since February 24th than they ever did before that. The McDonald's replacement is out of potatoes for fries at least, so things are building up. That's cool. That's a good piece of information. But basically, the sanctions are supposed to target the population, and they're supposed to target Russian enterprises and Russian people in general, and Russian like oligarchs and government figures in general, in order to freeze their assets and to give those assets to Ukraine. But the thing is that it doesn't necessarily work that way yet because, well, they're not targeting enough gas and oil industries. But sanctions are supposed to make it incredibly inconvenient and impossible to access money. Do you think NATO is going to get involved? I think that if Russia actually gets to the point where they're going to try to annex the entire, to cause a genocide so big that NATO is going to have to get involved. Also, like, they were get involved if Russia was using chemical, biological, or any other types of weapons, and they've been using phosphorus. So honestly, like, I think for NATO, they're going to get involved only if Russia does something that is not localized genocide anymore. So 50-50 on that one. Q&A, sorry. When everything is over, will you go back to Lviv? I hope that I can go back to Lviv before everything is over. If you mean for good or like forever, then no, because I've been living here for 11 years. I have not moved here because of the war. I have not moved here because of the war. I moved here 11 years ago. I am married and I have a husband here. I will hopefully, though, go to Ukraine the second that I get my travel permission. I'm not able to leave the country right now because my immigration my like green card application will be considered abandoned. And it's been processing for a while because, well, lots of things, COVID, Trump, the usual. So I'm waiting on that. And the second that I get it, I will be on the first plane to Warsaw and then on the first train to Lviv. So hopefully that answers your question. And then the total amount of casualties, well, no, because there is no total amount of casualties for this war so far because we can't access the data from a lot of cities like Kherson, like Mariupol, like Severodonetsk, because they're occupied. And once these territories are deoccupied, then we're going to see a lot more casualties than what we've heard about because, well, we don't have access to that yet. And on the Russian side, it's about 90,000 personnel with, including wounded. And then on the Ukrainian side, I think it's about 25,000, including wounded. Or rather, like 15,000 dead and like 25,000 including wounded. And then we don't know civilian casualties. So yeah, we do know 936 children have suffered because of this war. And in Mariupol, it's going to be thousands of people. It's going to be thousands of people. So yeah, casualties are very, very, very high. And those are all of the questions that I found in the Q&A. So let me know if there's anything else that interests you, and I'll do my best to answer it. I hope that you guys enjoyed I hope that you guys enjoy these newscasts every evening. If you are able to, please subscribe to my Patreon, because at this point, basically what ends up happening is I'm just losing people every month. And it does really, really help me when people are subscribed to Patreon. I do really appreciate that. So thank you very, very much to everybody who is. Thank you, Jen. According to British intelligence, the Russians have had 120,000 casualties. Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, casualties, yes. So maybe because my information is stemming from like 5-ish days ago. Do I regret learning Russian due to this war? Well, it's a very complex, like, question. So it's not necessarily that I regret learning Russian, right? Like, learning languages is not regretful. I regret having chosen to speak Russian with Ukrainian people who speak Russian. I regret having chosen to use Russian in Eastern Ukraine. I regret having been so open to speaking Russian with Russians abroad rather than speaking English to them. I regret thinking that Russian is one of my native languages, because it isn't. It's a language of an oppressor. So I don't regret having learned Russian, like, as in it just gives me more understanding of it just gives me more abilities, right? Because I can read and understand certain things that I wouldn't had I not known it, right? So, like, I can read Russian news and understand what's going on in their country, like, in terms of Ukraine. I can translate these things easily, but I do regret that I thought my whole life that it's just, well, not my whole life, but, like, let's say my whole childhood, that it's one of my native languages. It isn't. It's the language of an oppressor that was imposed onto me due to Russification. And I'm a Ukrainian child who had grown up in Ukraine, in the west of Ukraine, and and there is no reason for me to have ever had spoken Russian in my country. And every single person that I had spoken Russian to in my country had understood Ukrainian. So what I could have done is I could have persisted and insisted and spoken Ukrainian to them, and they could have responded to me in Russian if they didn't know how to speak it, but they would have understood it. And I should have stood my ground more when I was in Eastern states and people would like look down on me for speaking Ukrainian, because I'm in freaking Ukraine, and this is the language in Ukraine. You don't like it, move to Russia. What started this Ukrainian language renaissance? It's not a renaissance. More than half of Ukraine, 70% of people in Ukraine have always spoken Ukrainian. It was 100% until the freaking Catherine and until the Soviet Union. It's not a Ukrainian language renaissance. The war in 2014, the invasion, started because the people who were speaking Russian were people close to Russian states where Russian propaganda and Russification were the strongest. And it's honestly very, very disrespectful to call it a Ukrainian language renaissance, because Ukrainian language has always been a prevailing language in Ukraine. So please remember that. And never call it a Ukrainian language renaissance as if Ukrainian was being abandoned and then it suddenly came back. It was always there and it was always dominant. But there was also a lot of Russian due to Russification. It's not a renaissance. I get it. I understand. I'm just saying that, like, we need to be very, like, I'm not offended. It's just like I get passionate over these things, but like, it's like we need to be very careful when we talk about Ukraine and Russia and how we talk about Ukraine and Russia, because it is very important. It is very important to not say things like, Ukrainian language renaissance, because again, it makes it sound to a lot of people like the language is making a comeback and it was like gone, and now we're suddenly like, oh, Ukrainian. This is what Russia wants the world to think. They want the world to think that now we're these like Nazis who are like, oh, actually we're Ukrainian because we just decided so. But no, we've always been Ukrainian, and it's always been Ukraine, and they've stolen our history and culture and food and stuff like that. Well, Russian speakers are now switching to Ukrainian specifically because they're now seeing what Russia has done, and they're now seeing why it's important, and they're now choosing to not speak the language of the oppressor, because now they're not like, oh, it's just a language I grew up with. It's like, wow, people died for speaking our language specifically, and this language has been imposed onto us. It's never been just like the dominant language here. It's been like imposed onto this region. So yeah, that's why people are switching to Ukrainian, because there is no reason not to. But yeah, so that's about it. Because there is no point of teaching that language to their children. Like, let me explain it this way, right? Like, let's say you're like, I don't know, your brother or like your cousin or your friend, literally your friend, was abusing you. No, you're not. You're not. You're not offending me. I'm just trying to like explain it in like a different way, right? Like, let's say you have a friend and the friend was abusing you, or like you have an acquaintance or your neighbor and the neighbor is abusing you, right? And the neighbor is an awful person and they have been doing terrible things to you. And are you going to teach your children about but the neighbor is like a famous person, and they have some credibility, and they have been talked about by everyone else around you, and everyone else around you used to like him. Are you going to teach your children about his accomplishments, or are you going to just not give this person a time of day? You're not, right? So yeah. Hi, Skylar. So yeah, it's kind of like, this is not the best analogy, but also I'm getting sleepy, so I'm sorry. I could have come up with a better analogy, but it is what it is right now. But thank you guys for listening to the news. Thank you guys for hanging out. I really appreciate it. I am probably going to go to bed. Well, I do need to edit a thumbnail really quick. And after that, I'm going to go to bed. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for listening to the news about Ukraine. Please subscribe to my Patreon if you're able to. The link to it is in my bio. And I do really, really, really appreciate every single subscription. And it does help me greatly. So if you could, that would be wonderful. Thank you very, very much. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you, guys. I forgot about YouTube. Again. Yes. Yep. Always.